Whoa, 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 whoa!
The Middle East has long been a region of intense geopolitical rivalry and conflict, but few tensions are as dangerous and consequential as those between Iran and Israel. Over the years, both countries have found themselves on opposite sides of proxy wars, diplomatic disputes, and military buildups. But what would happen if this cold conflict turned hot? What if Iran attacks Israel? In this documentary, we'll explore the historical context, military capabilities, regional and global reactions, and the devastating consequences of such a conflict. Historical context. To understand the current tensions between Iran and Israel, we must look at history. Prior to Iran's Islamic Revolution in 1979, Iran and Israel had a relatively peaceful relationship, with both nations seeing each other as strategic partners in a tumultuous region. But everything changed with the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini's regime. Iran, under its new theocratic leadership, began openly opposing Israel's existence, labeling it a Zionist enemy and championing the Palestinian cause. Israel, on the other hand, viewed Iran as an emerging threat, especially as Tehran increased its support for militant groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in Gaza. Over the decades, both nations have been involved in proxy conflicts, with Israel striking Iranian targets in Syria and Iran continuing to build influence through its regional allies. But how do these tensions shape today's political and military landscape? Current tensions. In 2024, the tensions between Iran and Israel have reached unprecedented levels. The core issue remains Iran's nuclear ambitions. Despite international sanctions and diplomatic efforts to prevent Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons, the country has made significant progress in its uranium enrichment program. Israel, which views a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, has conducted cyberattacks, assassinations of nuclear scientists, and airstrikes on Iranian military targets. Iran, in turn, has supported proxy groups that attack Israel directly or indirectly. From Hezbollah's rocket attacks to Iranian influence in the Syrian civil war, Israel faces multiple fronts of conflict. Both countries are playing a dangerous game of brinkmanship that could one day erupt into direct conflict. Military capabilities. But if Iran were to launch an attack, how would the two countries fare? Let's first look at their military capabilities. Israel, with its advanced technology, well-trained military, and extensive air defense systems like the Iron Dome, has one of the most formidable defense forces in the region. The Israeli Air Force is among the best in the world, capable of precision strikes deep within enemy territory. On the other hand, Iran has focused on developing its missile program, boasting long-range missiles capable of hitting Israeli cities. Though Iran's conventional military is not as advanced as Israel's, it has a powerful network of proxies and non-conventional forces that could create chaos, including Hezbollah in Lebanon and Shiite militias across the Middle East. In a direct confrontation, both sides would suffer significant losses, but the repercussions extend far beyond their borders. Regional impact. An attack by Iran on Israel wouldn't just be a bilateral issue, it would reverberate throughout the Middle East. Neighboring countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt would have to respond. While Saudi Arabia shares Israel's concern about Iranian influence, it may hesitate to publicly align with Israel in the face of such a conflict. Syria and Lebanon, both heavily influenced by Iran, could see increased violence as Hezbollah and other Iranian-backed forces engage Israel. But beyond military alliances, the entire region's economy would be in jeopardy. The Persian Gulf, home to much of the world's oil supply, could become a battleground. Disruptions in oil shipping routes would lead to skyrocketing oil prices and economic instability far beyond the region. Global reactions. The fallout wouldn't be confined to the Middle East. Global superpowers would be forced to react. The United States, a close ally of Israel, would likely come to Israel's defense, although it would be cautious about becoming too entangled in another Middle Eastern war. Meanwhile, Russia, which has been aligned with Iran and Syria, could find itself caught between supporting its ally and managing its relations with Israel. China, with its growing influence in the Middle East, might also play a balancing act, given its strategic interests in Iranian oil and global trade. The European Union, often a mediator in the region, would call for diplomacy, though its ability to influence the conflict may be limited. Economic consequences. The economic impact of a war between Iran and Israel would be severe. The Middle East is a major source of the world's oil, and any disruption could cause oil prices to soar. Economies dependent on oil imports, especially in Europe and Asia, would feel the strain. In addition, global markets would likely see increased volatility, with investors fleeing to safer assets amid fears of a broader conflict. Trade routes through the Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway that sees about 1/5 of global oil supply pass through, would be at risk. If Iran were to block the strait, it could cripple the global oil market, sending prices through the roof and potentially triggering a global recession. Humanitarian impact. As with any conflict, the human toll would be devastating. Civilian populations in both Israel and Iran would be caught in the crossfire. Israel's cities, despite its missile defense systems, could be hit by Iranian rockets, while Iranian civilians could face Israeli airstrikes. Refugee flows would increase, overwhelming neighboring countries like Jordan and Lebanon. The humanitarian crisis would extend far beyond the battlefield, with millions in need of food, shelter, and medical assistance. International aid organizations would face enormous challenges in delivering aid in such a volatile region. Diplomatic resolutions. But is conflict inevitable? Diplomacy remains the only hope to avoid this disastrous scenario. The Abraham Accords, which normalized relations between Israel and several Arab states, represent a new era of diplomacy in the region. However, these accords haven't included Iran. Could there be a future where Iran and Israel find common ground? Mediators like the United Nations or neutral countries may still have a role to play in de-escalating tensions, but time is running out. Without diplomatic breakthroughs, the risk of war looms large.